I've worked with these men, the men that have everything, have money, have home, and sometimes homes, have all the wealth, have the family, the wife, the kids, like everything, the prestige, and yet are so disconnected from their bodies, so disoriented around their feelings, in denial of them, and it's a shit show for these guys. Again, they may look like they have everything together. And this was me. I was in the military for 10 years and I was a captain in the Air Force towards the end of that. And again, I was a guy that looked like I had everything. I was so disconnected from my body, so disconnected from what I was feeling. In my case, I was just numb. And then I tried to do relationship from that place. Relationship with women from a place of numbness, from a place of checked out of my own feelings. And I've already sort of alluded to it, but how do you think that went, Jetty?
Not so great, not so magical.
No.
Well, and
dark magic, if anything.
Oh, dark magic, yeah, of course. Which I think that brings up a good direction of conversation is what is the role for our emotions as men in our relationships? Especially if we're talking about relationships that have polarity in them with masculine and feminine. Yeah. Where do you bring emotions? Where do you make room for that in your relationship?
Yeah. One of the things that I'm constantly, let's say, treating, I'm not a doctor. I'm not even a therapist. So I don't treat patients, right? I don't treat people. All the same, when I've been working with couples for 10 years, although I'm specializing now really more in working with men specifically, but generally when I'm working in a relationship context, I'm treating disconnection. It's not even so much that, even couples that are struggling with polarity, for example, even maybe the long-term roommate kind of couple where they've lost polarity, still what's happening there is a deep disconnection in many cases. Disconnect from their own desires, for example. The inability or the lack of capacity or the lack of skill around articulating one's real experience. And so I think that relationships, first and foremost, I say, need to be able to create safety for both partners. There's a lot of emphasis on creating safety for women in heterosexual relationships, as well there should be. But what doesn't get talked about often is, well, what about men? How do we feel? Don't we get to feel safe in relationships? And what does that even mean and look like? Right? And I see this a lot when I'm starting to work with a couple, and where the wife or woman or girlfriend hasn't felt safe in some way, and she's able to start finding her voice and talking about it. Right. Well, what inevitably emerges from her partner is also a sort of, well, what about me? Don't I get to feel safe? And a big part of what that looks like is allowing him or him being allowed to have the space to have feelings too. To feel uncomfortable. I worked with a guy recently whose partner expected him to give her money. I'll skip the bigger story. The bottom line is he felt really uncomfortable continuing to give her money over and over and over. He was overstepping his own boundaries. He was essentially violating his own limits, stepping over his own limits and continuing to give her money long after it felt kind and nourishing and like generous for him to do. But he wasn't allowed to, neither by her nor by himself. Right? He wasn't allowed to have feelings about that. He wasn't allowed, like if he felt uncomfortable about that or felt like something was off, didn't matter. The expectation was from her, both her and from himself, by the way, keep giving her the money because otherwise, you're a dick. You're a bad guy. I mean, if we don't create space for that man to just be able to feel uncomfortable and say, look, this is off. Something doesn't feel right. This isn't working for me. Right. If men don't also have the space to have feelings about what's going on, then safety at best is a it happens for one partner, but more than likely neither people feel safe inside of that.
Yeah. And there's a couple legacies of men's work. I think of them as like the first generation where we were trying to get away from this traditional machismo, hiding our feelings. I'm talking about circa Iron John when it started to come together, where the teaching there is a version of the only safe place in the world for a man is in a circle of other men, because only other men will really understand what a man requires when it comes to safety. And I still think that there's some validity to that. I think there is a space that only men can hold for each other. That's why I'm such a big proponent of men's circles and spaces like that. And at the same time, I do think that there's an important conversation to be had about what safety looks like in a relationship for a man, and having that safety be provided by his partner. And what that looks like. So let's go down that road for a second.
Yeah.
What does it look like for you to feel more safe in your relationship from your partner?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really beautiful distinction too. And I like that. I've never thought about that. Like the way that I feel safe around other men is a unique experience that just can't be had in other contexts. My wife, what helps me feel safe is, I make a big distinction between criticism and feedback. I've experienced a lot of criticism from partners over the years. And I define criticism as simply direction given that isn't being asked for. Right? Direction given that is not being asked for. That's what I call criticism. And my wife, and we had to, find our way with this early on, because I think a lot of women, because they are used to not getting their needs met. And so one of the ways that women try to get their needs met is to give men direction. Here's how I need you to meet my needs. Now, they don't often say it like that. It's often a lot less skillful and much more, can be abrasive, harsh, all kinds of things. And I've certainly experienced it. So one thing that, my wife does really well as she's learned this need that I have to not feel criticized. She's very mindful to give me feedback, which is to share her experience, talk about her feelings, talk about, what comes up for her in various situations. She's allowed to get angry, etc., all that. But what doesn't work is telling me what to do about things and how, giving me direction that I'm not asking for, and she's really good at honoring that distinction. My wife will tell me when I've said something that hurts her feelings, or I do something, or I'm about to do something that maybe makes her nervous, or she's really quick to tell me, because that's my contribution to her safety. It's not always easy, but her knowing that I want to hear what's happening for her, even if I don't like it, or it's inconvenient or uncomfortable, whatever. She knows that I do want to hear it, right? So she feels more safe. Okay, well, I feel more safe when I know she's not just gonna be my mother or my boss or my prison warden, right? She's gonna let me make my own decisions. She's when I say let me, I mean she gives me the space to make my own decisions, so I get to be my own man. That helps me feel safe.
Yeah,
that's one way.
Well, and that requires a certain kind of partner too, to have the trust and the confidence in herself to be able to accept the consequences of your choices, right? Because I think that's where a lot of these relationships I see, and even in my own relationships, when a woman doesn't feel safe and tries to control or manipulate and influence the outcome by blocking permission, by saying, well, no, you can't do that, or I don't want you to do that. Whereas, and I know for myself and my wife, she's done so much work with herself to have the grace to be with my decisions, and knowing that my decisions are going to have an impact on her. That's what being in a relationship is all about, and vice versa.
Yeah.
I think on both sides of the equation, we got to do our work so that we can really be 100%. With the consequences of those choices and accept it. That's part of the choosing each other, right?
100%, man. I mean, my wife we've built up so much trust over the years, and we made some, we early in our relationship, we definitely both made some choices that were hard for the other to be with. That brought us to the brink of ending as well. But I think this is one of the beautiful things that happens. It can happen in long-term relationship. If both, like you said, both parties are willing to lean in, do the work, take ownership of their role in things, we learn. We learn. Like I know where my wife's limits are for the most part. And sometimes I'm gonna want to do things that push her limits. But finding our way together means, okay, I love this question in couples work. I often give this question to couples and I often sit with it myself. And the question is, what would serve we?
Mm.
What would serve we? Not what would serve me or what would serve you, but what would serve we? Me and you is included in that equation. And that's like an alchemical question, because I can't see the answer if I'm only focused on what serves me or what would serve her and not me. I can't see the answer. It's not available to either of us when we're in that power struggle of, my safety or your safety.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's how do we both, what would serve we? Man, magic comes from that question. The real magic, not the fake bullshit magic that I wanted when I was 26.
Right.
Real
that
magic.
was one of the my wife and I we asked some of the elders in our community to just have some sessions with us. These weren't formal counselors or relationship experts, just people we respected by how they held relationship. And we asked them to sit down with us and ask us some questions as we were getting ready for our marriage to get married. And that was one of the most poignant pieces of advice that one of these elder couples gave us, was that we have to find a way to see the relationship as its own entity, like the Holy Trinity, right? Like there's myself, there's my partner, and then there's the we, the relationship that has to be given its own pulse, its own heartbeat, its own spirit and soul. And it's so easy to forget that. But when we do come back to that, when we do have those moments, I call it, I think a lot of in like sports terminology. So my wife and I, we talk about when we get on other sidelines, like when we, all of a sudden we're on opposing sides of the field. And when one of us recognizes it, we'll say like, whoa, we got to huddle up. We got to get back in the huddle and get on the same page.
I like that.
Because in those moments, we're just thinking about our separate points of that triangle and forgetting about the we part.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a beautiful practice and awareness. I think this is a really courageous path for men to walk, the path of relationship, the path of relational awareness and relational skill. My parents divorced when I was 4 years old, and it was not nice. And they basically continued hating each other until they probably just landed in indifference for the rest of my life. I mean, they never had a healthy relationship again. Well, they never had one while they were together either. But and that pain, that deep sadness for me has persisted throughout my life, and it actually it gave me this weird schizophrenic experience of being so deeply longing to bring people together, to be in relationship again, to like to heal that wound, to heal the family, to every holiday after age 4 was a choice. Do I go to that family or this family? Where do I go? I don't get to be with my whole family. I got to choose. So and that, I mean, for decades to come, and still, I'm 48, and still there's choices to be made on the holidays that I don't want to have to make. But so that caused me to both long for bringing people together, but also to not trust relationship. I can't trust it. I can't trust relationship because people are going to leave. I've had to confront this with my wife and my marriage, the part of me that just learned to take care of myself and in a way not need relationship because I can't trust it. I can't trust it. I can't trust in intimacy. I can trust it for a weekend. Boy, I had lots of those in my 20s and 30s. Great weekends, with amazing intimate weekends with women, or month-long relationships. Those were the best in those days. So easy.
Fast and furious, right?
Right. And but that didn't make a good life for me.
Sure.
It always left me with a hangover, and the hurt that I caused in women as well, from just not being able to show up again after a nice and intense weekend. And so with my wife, healing the relational wounds has been core to my journey as a man, awakening to my feelings, to my pain, my suffering, my grieving. I've spent so much of my adult life not consciously resisting, but because I didn't know, but just not grieving all that there is to fucking grieve.
Mm-hmm.
And again, my body just contracting and calcifying. That's the word. My body calcifying around these ungrieved losses and experiences. I mean, and there's countless. I mean, there's in my book, Choose Her Every Day or Leave Her, there's a chapter called I can't remember exact title, but something like we men must learn to grieve everything, right? Because when I can't grieve, what does my wife get but a shut down man or an angry man, because I can't move these emotions through me.